There are some days that I wonder if I should be painting at all. I think I made a mess of it. But what can I do? I know. I'll cover it up. That's it. Yeah. I've got a cloud, and maybe I could put some forest over it. Yeah. No one will ever know. Yeah, I'll settle for that. Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today's Bob Ross painting is another classic, Sunset Aglow. I did a few small additions and gave it a special little extra twist. I covered up a few little mistakes I made, but they're pretty seamless and you can hardly see the errors at all. Who am I kidding? I'm afraid this is a problem sometimes we have when we paint. We sort of make a little mistake and then we try and patch it up, we try to cover it up, and in the end we just settle, don't we? We sort of just think, oh well, it's good enough. But is it? And my little piece today to camera is all about not really settling for things, but to actually learn from the mistakes, but to actually take the time to go back and repeat the painting. Don't settle, because you'll always be disappointed with that painting. It will always remind you of the one that got away. So take the time to do a proper repair and try to make sure you don't repeat the same mistake again. You might do, but every time you do, it's a learning experience. Like learning to speak. I still haven't quite mastered it yet, but I'm getting there slowly. So, you know the routine. Sit back, relax, cup of tea, notepad at the ready, and watch me paint Sunset Aglow with some better fixes than these ones. Happy painting, people. So here's my canvas, 16 inches by 20, and I put a couple of map pins in the edge. This gives me the horizon line. I use my 1-inch brush to measure the distance up from the bottom of the canvas. I'll be using a couple of Bob Ross 1-inch landscape brushes, a nice new one and a slightly older one for the liquid white. I'll also have a filbert brush, a fan brush and a liner brush, and of course a Bob Ross palette knife. I'm going to prepare my canvas with some Bob Ross liquid white oil paint. This is a wet on wet oil painting technique, and for ease of use I store a little liquid white in an airtight pot in the freezer. Ah yes, I dipped my 1-inch brush into it last time. Naughty boy. Okay, let's get started with that old 1-inch brush and a small amount of liquid white and dot it around the canvas. Hold on to your canvas and work this well into the surface. We want a thin, even coat. This is essential that we don't over apply. I'll use my fingertips just to get some samples, and you can see that one's a little bit over the top. That's okay, and that one, well, not quite enough. Finish off your canvas with long flat strokes to even out the surface. This is very important. I want to dry clean my brush to get rid of the surplus liquid white. This can sometimes trip us up later on if we leave it in the brush. It dilutes the first colour, so let's make sure we clean that brush thoroughly. Here's my palette. I've got a few colours out already, and I'll list them down below in the description. But the first colour is going to be Indian Yellow. It's one of my favourites. Notice how I pull the paint towards where my thumb is. It's like a clock face really. That way I'm not painting under any other colours on my palette. Indian Yellow isn't the strongest of colours, so load plenty. I want to position my light patch really sort of above the centre line of my canvas, about here. So well above the horizon line I put in, and I'm going to make a nice large patch of Indian Yellow. Allow it to spread out and use little crisscross strokes at the edges. It's much easier to blend other colours into it. If you leave a hard edge, sometimes it can be very sort of distracting. Now, there's some water in my painting, and unlike Bob's painting, I'm going to drop some down there as a reflection. Now into the yellow ochre, again tap firmly. This colour's a little bit more opaque, in other words it's a little stronger than the Indian Yellow, but again use little crisscross strokes. You want one colour to shake hands with the other. And again pull straight down for the water area below. I dry clean my brush and blend those edges. Stand back occasionally and make sure you're doing a really good job on this. Each colour wants to blend into the other with no hard edges. Now, let's add some bright red to our painting.
This goes beautifully with Indian yellow and yellow ochre. It makes a lovely sort of peachy orange colour. Again, little crisscross strokes, lots of blending and lots of dry cleaning of that brush. I'll blend the water as well. There. Now, let's mix up a new colour. This time, alizarin crimson with a small amount of phthalo blue to make a nice lavender colour. Mix it and test it on your painting by taking a small amount, maybe on the end of your finger, and just rub it on somewhere blank on the canvas where there's some liquid white to test your colours. If the colour's not quite right, you can make an adjustment, but this is good for me. I dry clean my brush, the same one we used for the yellow and the red, and apply a small amount to the corners. Allow this colour to bump into the red, but take care, the blue colour is still active, even though it's been mixed with another colour. If it hits the yellow, you could end up with a green sky. I just add a few touches of neat alizarin crimson to my sky, just for a little variety, a bit of fun. I stand back and wonder if my sky is quite strong enough. It's maybe, well, a bit weak. Let's try putting a cloud into my painting. I happen to have one on a stick. Yes, I think my background sky is just a little bit sort of too weak. I need a bit more contrast. So let's put a bit more crimson, blue and lavender in the sky. It'll draw the eye to the centre of the painting. That's better. Now, into some titanium white with a fan brush. Add a tiniest speck of red. I don't want bright pink, but I want white with a hint of red, so just off white. And notice how well I load the corner of my brush. I'm going to paint some clouds. And if you've seen me paint clouds before, you know I like to sometimes sketch them out against my sky, and I go against that lovely dark colour in the background. And this gives me an idea of position and size. Now, lay your brush at an angle to the canvas and imagine you're painting little letter C's. C for cloud. Don't forget, always lead your brush across the canvas, handle first. If you try pushing, see what happens. Yes, the brush really breaks apart. Brushes are like people. They like to be led. They don't like to be pushed. There we go. I'm applying thick, heavy paint to create a sort of silver lining to my cloud. Try not to paint a Nessie. You want lovely, soft folds of paint, creating a lovely sort of soft, billowing cloud shape that goes off the edge of the canvas. But don't waste the paint that's left on your brush. As it starts to run out, I fill in the middle and the base of the cloud. This gives your cloud depth. It looks like it's made of many, many layers of detail. There. Now, I'm going to use my nice clean 1-inch brush, the soft one, and I'm going to just gently blend my cloud. Use only the corner of the brush, and again, little letter C shapes, just little dabs. But don't touch the top edge. Leave that bright edge alone. And I work up and down into my cloud, trying not to damage some of that detail. There's so much lovely information there, and it'd be so easy just to blend it right out. So try to hold back a bit, if you can. Dry clean my brush, and now soft, sideward strokes. Fluff the cloud up. This raises little peaks of colour from the edges of the clouds. Finally, long flat strokes just to lay the paint flat on the canvas. That was my cat going out for a walk. Sorry about the interruption. Let's paint some more clouds. A little one here, and I put a little bit of lavender in the base for a shadow. Maybe another one here on the left. Now, for something a little bolder and darker, I picked up a small amount of lavender colour and mixed it with that white on my brush. I want sort of a nice cloud here that sort of stands out a bit more. But take care, there's a tendency to have everything lining up. If you look carefully, you can see that the ends of my clouds, they all seem to be in one plane. So try to break that up by painting through the centre occasionally. You'll notice I'm using a little bit of a different stroke here. I'm just letting the brush bounce and twirl. Again, use the 1-inch brush just to tap and blend gently. I'll add a couple more of these clouds directly over these patches of red. That was lucky, wasn't it? It's almost like I planned it. Whilst I'm playing with my clouds, let's try a few highlights. I've got my nice 1-inch brush and I tap into a little bit of that lavender with a tiny bit of white. Let's see if I can make a little bit of a sparkle here and there. I'll just touch the edge of my clouds and just add a little sparkly highlight. They may survive, I may not keep them. I'm just enjoying myself, and so should you. I think they're okay, but we'll see. But my clouds, well, they kind of bother me. They're a bit too formal looking. So I think I'm going to go back in and loosen up these edges slightly. You can see I've done the one on the right already, and now it's sort of softened these ones up, and I think they look a little bit better. They fit better with the other clouds on my painting. Don't be afraid to make changes to your paintings. Now, shall I use a filbert brush or a palette knife to do a distant mountain? I'm going to use the filbert brush today. I'm taking a small amount of white into some of my lavender colour. I want a very pale distant hill or mountain, somewhere above this horizon line, so I'll just put a few marks on there to remind me where I'm going with my painting. Now, a little bit further to the right, I'm going to just make a very sort of soft hill-like shape. There's no detail here, it's too far away to really be seen, so I just want to create the illusion that there's a little tiny suggestion of some highlights, some soft humps and bumps. Let some of the original underpainting come through to the fore here. The idea is just to create depth and distance to our painting. Now, let's paint a mountain that's a little closer. I've taken my lavender with a little black, a little Van Dyke brown, maybe even a touch of crimson to make a darker colour. I load my filbert brush well, and I start to sculpt the shape. Yeah, there's my colour, pretty dark. Okay, so this wants to be closer, so it wants to be a little bit taller, and I'll put a little mark here. I think that's the maximum size of my mountain, and just gently sketch away. There, I think that looks okay. I'm going to use small amounts of colour just to sculpt my mountain. I try and imagine the light coming from the right and from the left, and try and drag the paint to create a nice sort of shape. Not too much detail though. This is still a small mountain far away. It doesn't take long before I decide to add a little bit more to my painting. This can be a fatal error sometimes, to kind of, well, try and do a bit too much. So let's give it a little bit more height. Remember what I said, you can't make it any smaller, so be careful. Mountains tend to grow, sometimes out of control. There, I think that's about it. I'm going to carry on with my filbert brush. I dry clean it thoroughly, and I go through some titanium white. I put some fresh out on my palette, and I load just one side. I load it well. I'm going to use my brush like a palette knife. So, hold it very gently, finger and thumb, and just imagine the light coming from the right and it playing on the side of this little mountain. Use your brush gently and just let the paint break. Remember, this is just like using a soft palette knife. In fact, I sometimes find it easier than a palette knife to break my snow. Let's add a little shadow to the other side of my brush, and that's just the original dark lavender colour. So I've got light on one side and dark on the other, and I just go back in and just strengthen up a few of those little shadows. Notice how I bump the white out of the way a little bit. There. After a little bit more play, I'll add a little bit more highlight to this point of the mountain. I stand back from my painting. I think this mountain is a bit too bold. I'm going to take some titanium white and a little bit of red, make a very sort of soft pinkish glow colour. I'm going to just calm down the highlights. They look a bit too strong. This will make my mountain less bold, I hope. There. Now, let's add some foothills. I've got my nice 1-inch brush back, and I'm going to go back into my lavender colour here. I'll avoid the mountain colour, it's got blacks and browns and all sorts into it. So I'm going to go from the other side and get a little bit of lavender here. And I just want to gently tap in where I think there are going to be some foothills. This will trim off the bottom sort of quarter of my mountain, so it'll reduce the size a little bit. I go back with a little bit of white on my brush because the dark colour doesn't show up on the dark side. So I use dark on the right and light purple on the left. I'll keep adding detail to my painting here, using dark and light alternately, so it looks like there's more detail. Notice how I just tap and let the brush sort of leave an imprint of the bristles on the canvas. Now, with firm pressure, really press on the canvas and grab a little of that colour and pull straight down. There, make sure you don't pull at an angle. I think I did a little bit, but I've got away with it. I'm going to brush across my reflections to create a lovely ripple effect. Then with a tiny bit of that titanium white paint and my knife held firmly, I'm going to slide it along at an angle to create some little water lines. Keep them nice and level. I'll add a few across my reflections to break them up slightly. This gives my water a nice sheen and looks almost like a reflection of the mountain. Now, time to do some land. I want some trees to the left and right. I gather up my blue, black, brown, crimson to make a lovely deep dark underpainting colour. I just want something good and strong and dark. I'm going to carry on with my fan brush even though it's in a bit of a pickle. I've got a second one for my highlights. So let's use the old one first. I'm going to go through my dark colour. This come out as a sort of a blacky blue colour. Perfect for fir trees in a silhouette. I think about the shape of the land and how far to bring it across. I stopped short of the centre line of my mountain, but big enough to cover this area of my background sky. I use my fan brush to mark the maximum size of my tree. This is the biggest of the trees. I mark the centre line by touching with the edge of the brush. Now, lay the brush over at an angle, and just on one corner, touch. Leave a little imprint of the brush as you go down the centre line of the tree. Sometimes it's nice just to put on a few outward branches and leave the centre of the tree a little bit bare. You can come back and fill that in later, but this helps you sort of develop the size of your tree before you commit too much further, so it doesn't grow too wide. Then you can go back through and fill in the centre a bit more. This is just one of 3 or 4 different ways I like to paint trees. There, I think that works quite well. Not too wide, nice and shapely. Let's add another tree. This time I'm going to fill in the centre line completely. And then I come back in and add a few side branches. So a variation on the first tree. If you feel very confident, you can do 2 in 1. Mark the centre line and add the side branches and the centre all in one go. There. But there's a sort of a bad patch on the edge of my canvas, so I'll fill that in with a little half tree. And then I want to fill in the land with some dark colour as well. I want somewhere for my highlights. As my brush runs out of paint, I'll add a few little reflections. These don't have to be at all special or very well painted. They just have to be in the right place and at roughly the right angle. We'll brush across and down and it'll change the look of them completely, and they will just become shadows on the water or reflections of the trees above. Now with my nice brush, in firm pressure and pull straight down, down, straight down each time. Don't pull at an angle. There. I told you it wasn't too hard to do. Dry clean your brush very well. And then, quite importantly, you want to make sure you pull from the edge to the centre. If you go from the centre outwards, you'll leave a dirty mark in the middle of the water. Here, you can brush across and leave with a little flourish. That last little stroke, well, that's a bit tight, so it's just a half stroke. But don't overdo it. I'll repeat that process over on the right hand side. I want more trees here, but I do the same technique. I mark centre lines and then add either a complete tree in one go, or I just do like this one, just a few sort of side branches, then go back and fill in the centre. But experiment, see which works best for you. If you enjoy watching my videos and you want to support the channel, don't forget, give it a little like, that's a thumbs up, it really helps the channel stand out. You can also subscribe and leave a comment for me. You can also buy me a cup of coffee, which I spend on more paint supplies. Now, time to highlight these trees. I've gone into my cadmium yellow, Indian yellow, and using a fresh fan brush for this, I push into the paint. See, I make a little ridge right on the edge of the bristles. The light is going to be coming from the right, so I want to be doing the right hand side of my trees. Just touch here and there. If the paint doesn't stick so well, either add a little tiny drop of thinners to your paint to make it sort of softer and easier to stick, but don't forget, every time you touch the brush to the canvas, you're going to pick up some dark. So I dry clean my brush now and then, just touch it off on a paper towel. A little bit of change of colour here. I'm going to go into some yellow ochre. It really helps to change up the colours occasionally. I'll start here on the bank, which I think is going to catch the most light, with a bit more of that yellow ochre colour. Don't forget, leave a little dark here and there. It really helps your painting become three-dimensional. Also, the critters need somewhere to sleep, as Bob would say. There, I think that's just about right. Leave yourself the option to come back and add more highlight later if you wish. Just as we did before, in the background, I want to add a few little waterlines. Touch your palette knife to some grubby white paint. It doesn't have to be clean, in fact it's better if it's a little discoloured. Now, on the right hand side, I'm going to add some highlights to my grassy areas with the 1-inch brush. Again, I pull out the paint into a little curtain of colours and press the brush firmly into the palette to drive paint to the edge of my brush. You can see the back of the brush has got some colour, but the top edge is clean. This means the brush will splay and open nicely when I touch the canvas. I work from the top, under the trees, to the corner of my canvas, following the lay of the land. I zoomed in a bit to give you a bit of an idea that occasionally I tip my brush more on a corner. It stops you painting stripy land. Save a little dark here and there. I like to use my fan brush on the edge of this land. Just press under the trees just to add the suggestion of a little highlight, but remember, that's all in shadow, so don't overdo it. It gives it that nice finishing touch though, just to make up things a little bit less regular in shape. I finish off with a few little grasses. This is just done with the edge of the palette knife, just pressed into the paint and slid up and down to leave some little details. I'll add a few points to the tops of my trees and a few scratchy sticks and twigs, and I think my painting is finished. Or is it?
So I thought my painting was finished. I'll just live with it. I may not like that mountain, but, well, it'll do. But really, was I that happy with it? No. I needed to go back and make some changes. I decided I would just live with it for a day or so first, just in case it was just freshness of a painting. But I'm afraid no matter how long I had the painting, it still bothered me. So, a bravery test was involved. Keep watching and see how my painting turned out in the end.
Having decided to fix this mountain, I want to get rid of it, but I can't remove it completely. Time for a bravery test. Scrape off as much paint as you can. Now, that looks better straight away. But I can't do much more about it until I change some other features. His little friend in the background just doesn't stand out. So I've gone back to my palette and I've mixed up a colour that is just a shade stronger than I originally used. I want to make it a little bolder, so it sort of disguises the foreground mountain a bit more. The other happy accident is I didn't continue the hills on the left of my mountain either. That was a big no-no, so I gently fiddled this in. If I smudge my trees, I'll go back and repair them. Now, time to work on the main mountain again. I've increased that colour that I used on the background mountains just a hair. I don't want it to be much more than just a tiny bit stronger than the background hills. I want them almost to look as though they're the same range of mountains. I also kill off this dark side using a little bit more white mixed into the same colour. Careful, don't make the mountain any bigger. Remember my top tip, you can't make them any smaller. But I might have a few tricks up my sleeve for that as well. Remember, the first mountain was too bold, too bright and too dark. My highlights want to be very pastel and soft. No detail. Keep it very, very distant looking. Now, let's see if we can make this mountain look a little smaller. I reload my 1-inch brush with some of that nice background colour I used for the mountain. I need to soften up these little foothills. They're just too strong. They draw almost a line across my painting, and I want to lift them up a little higher to reduce the size of the mountain. You see, told you there was a little trick. So I let some of this paint drift up into the base of the mountain. Let's add a few snowy highlights on the same brush. And almost magically, my mountain looks a little bit softer and more distant. But there's something missing from my painting. Sunset aglow? Where's my sunset? It's gonna be here. I took a clean 1-inch brush and a small amount of pure titanium white paint and just tap. Keep it nice and tight, don't let it spread all over. If you need to brighten it, dry clean your brush and reload. And like magic, my sunset appears. So there you have it, my version of the Bob Ross classic Sunset Aglow, with a few happy accidents and corrections along the way. So there you have it, Sunset Aglow, a Bob Ross classic. But don't move, there's another painting coming right along with some more repairs and fixes on it. I get myself into quite a pickle sometimes. Happy painting, people.